This is The Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
You take the blue pill. The story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill. You stay in Wonderland. And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
There was a mighty nation, blessed above all of creation. It was a rare and precious pearl, conceived in faith and liberty, home of the brave, land of the free. It was the envy of the world. But this shining city on a hill has turned from the Creator's will and let evil take control. Now the reckless men who lead them want to strip away their freedom and to steal their very soul. Now it's smoke and mirrors, switching bait, criticize and confiscate and let the guilty walk away. In this once righteous, godly nation, in the halls of education, they forbid a child to pray. They say we need to spread the wealth. They pretend to guard the health of the feeble and the poor, while the hand they hold behind their backs confuses and conceals the fact that the wolf is at the door. There's an unseen hand that pulls the string and makes his little puppets dance.
Well, good morning, America. We have a fantastic radio program in front of us today. We are going to be talking to two people who are intimately involved in the whole financial picture of our country. And these folks are, first of all, my very, very good friend and mentor, and I think the iconic leader of the freedom movement in the United States, and I think worldwide. G. Edward Griffin is our guest today. And Ed Griffin is a gentleman who has spent his entire life trying to expose the lies behind so much of what's happening in America today, and he's done a terrific job of that. He's appeared in I don't know how many different documentary movies. He's written books. His book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, is probably the leading publication on exposing the banking system and the Federal Reserve and exposing fiat money. And he's just a fascinating individual. And Ed Griffin is our guest today on this radio program. Also, I've got another gentleman who I just met recently, and Josh Anderson is an entrepreneur, but he started with three other gentlemen a company called 7K Metals, and they are going to be a new sponsor of Connecting the Dots, and we are really excited to have them on board as a sponsor. And we are going to be doing a lead-in today, kind of talking about what 7K Metals is all about. And we felt like it would be a perfect time to have G. Edward Griffin and Josh Anderson on the same microphone so that they can kind of get to know one another. We have another Red Pill Expo coming up in June, and I believe that 7K Metals is going to be one of the sponsors for that event. And so we're going to be talking about some of the that really make sound money important for America, because we are running out of time, and I don't think we're going to have more opportunity to try to save this country. The financial system is going to go. It's been planned that way for a very long time, and Ed Griffin will certainly explain that to our listeners. But with that said, we need to start protecting our families, and I see the acquisition of gold and silver, precious metals, as being an insurance policy to protect our families in a way that we can't protect any other way. So with that said, Ed, welcome to the radio program. I'll start off with you. Please tell our listeners about your book, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and all the time that you spent in exposing the New World Order.
Well, good morning, Dan, and thank you for that great introduction. Now, let's see. My mission is to tell about everything I'm doing, and let's see. Where do I start? I'm laughing because every time somebody asks me what's on my mind, I have to stop and think, do I even have a mind? It seems like I'm so splintered lately. But, okay, let's start at the top of that great question, Dan. I wrote this fantastic book on Federal Reserve. I had no idea it was going to be well received. I call it a fantastic book because it was kind of a fantasy of mine that who never had any education or training in banking or money, didn't have much interest in it in school, except that I didn't have enough money. I had no interest in how money came to be or anything like that. But through a long series of events, I sort of took an interest in it. I was interested in I wanted to do a little documentary film. I went through that phase of my life and my career where I was producing low-budget documentary films on important topics that I thought were important at least to us all. And the issue of inflation came up. This was way back in I guess it was the early 80s. I got the idea. I wanted to do a documentary on inflation. I wasn't quite sure what the cause of inflation was when I started the project, except I was pretty sure it wasn't what they were telling us. And of course, what they were telling us, and still somewhat they tell us this, is that, well, it was everybody else's fault. It wasn't the government's fault. It wasn't the banking fraternity's fault. It was us, we who used the money. It was our fault. I remember listening to some academic explain this in great detail once back in the 80s. That, well, it was because the farmers were getting too much money for the stuff they were growing, and that's why the cost of food was so high. And there ought to be some government control to prevent this gouging that the farmers were getting away with and all the subsidies that they were getting. And then I heard somebody else say, well, no, it wasn't the farmers, it was the distributors, the people that bought the farmers' produce and distributed it to the grocery stores. And they were the bad guys because they were getting too much money. And then somebody else said, no, it wasn't us. We're not. No, it was those unions that we have to pay these truckers too much to move the food. It was this, greedy unions. And then the union people said, no, it was management of these grocery stores. They were getting too much profit margin, and we need government controls for that. And everybody was pointing the finger at somebody else because they were supposedly greedy. And the solution, it seemed at that time, was that, well, if we just had another government regulation, like we needed that, like the hole in the head. But anyway, the idea was if we just had some more government regulation, that would take care of it. And I knew that was wrong, but I didn't know really how inflation, was created, and I had no idea what to do about it. So I thought I'll learn about it and I'll make a little documentary film. Well, that was the beginning of a long series of awakenings, and I guess about 10 or 12 years later, I came out the other side of that with, I had acquired my CFP designation, the Certified Financial Planning thing. Never wanted to be a financial planner, but I wanted to learn about the real markets. And so I was giving lectures on the Federal Reserve, and people were asking me questions about money. Well, how do you make investments and all this? Meanwhile, I'm learning as I go. So I'm kind of giving you an idea of the fact, which is I had no idea, Dan, when I started that project, where I was going to head with it, where I was going to end up. I certainly didn't think I was going to write a book. I didn't think I'd ever have enough knowledge to do that. So it was, as I say, a fantasy that I could do something like that. And I gave up the project a couple of times because I thought it was way too big for me. But there was something burning in the back of my brain that said, no, you've got to get back to this. And so finally, after 7 years at least of intense research and learning and moving along, I published the book. And blowing me down, it was a success. People still, they want to read the book. We've sold we're approaching almost 1 million copies around the world. It's been published in different languages. It's published in China, published in Russia, it's published in the Eastern European countries. There's a great interest in what's happening in the Federal Reserve System. And there should be, because the Federal Reserve, although it was modeled after the Bank of England, sort of added a lot of bells and whistles to the idea, and it became the model for just about all of the banking systems of the world. So if you understand what the Fed is and how it works and what negative impacts it has on you and me and everybody that uses money, well, then you understand what's going on everywhere in the world, even though you may not have the details of, well, the Bank of Brazil or the Bank of Canada or the Deutsche Bank or whatever. It's all pretty much the same game. I don't know if that answers your question, Dan, but that's sort of the story of my journey.
Well, it certainly is a great point to start the conversation, because that journey that you went through, I think many of us have gone through that same journey. Obviously, we haven't written books, and especially not best-selling books like you have, but I think all of us have gone through a period of learning where we understand that the banking system and fiat money that is really shaping our world and shaping our future is really something that is not designed to improve the lives of average citizens like I think most people believe. It's actually designed to create a control grid system that will control virtually everything we do from cradle to grave and every action we take, because quite honestly, if you cannot buy food or you can't take care of your family because you have no money, you have nothing. You have no freedom. So with that, Ed, I want to start with what the Federal Reserve System is. First of all, it's not federal. They have no reserves. And in fact, it's a private corporation, a for-profit private corporation that is controlled by the wealthiest families in the world. And let's go from there.
Well, that's a good starting point. Just what you said was something that most people don't know. And frankly, I imagine anybody that might have just accidentally tuned into this program and they hear that for the first time, they're probably thinking that that's not true. Because otherwise, wouldn't they have heard that somewhere along the line? Wouldn't they have heard that from their teachers if they went to school and took some economic classes? Wouldn't they have heard it on the news? Wouldn't they have heard it somewhere? But it is true, absolutely true. And that's one of the things that really shook me up when I got into thinking. I was just going to do a little quick and dirty story about how inflation was created. And, of course, that's not the end of the story. You have to know what the beginning of the story is, and that's where it takes you to the origins of the Fed back in the meeting was held in 1910 on Jekyll Island. And what emerges out of that path, when you go all the way back to the beginning, you realize, as you said, that it's not a government agency. It's not federal at all. It has no reserves. It's not even a bank. They call it a Federal Reserve Bank, but it's not even a bank. So what is it? Well, it's a cartel. It's a cartel no different in substance than an oil cartel or an apple cartel or anything like that. It just happens to be a banking cartel, which means it's made up of the largest banking institutions in the United States, and they form together in a union, an association, sometimes they like to call it. It's not much different than a labor union or a professional association. It's a group of independent companies who, on the surface at least, appear to be competitors. And they all have different stockholders, different names, and different boards of directors and all of that. And they are all in the same market, so they seem to compete with each other for their market share. But they decide at some point to come together and work out agreements between themselves to reduce that competition so that they don't have to cut prices or, they don't have to cut their profit margins. They just all agree, more or less, on the basis of their current power positions and their current share of the market and who they know and, that kind of thing. They agree on how they're going to divide up the control and the division of labor within their profession. They usually starts with something rather simple, like sharing patents and processes. They'll sell half ownership of a patent, for example. They'll sell half ownership to their competitor. So now they both have an equal share in the patent. So there's no need for them to fight against each other. They each have a share of whatever the margin is. So let's push the margin up instead of down. Or they may decide to divide up products and services. Like, okay, I'll produce tractors, you produce automobiles. Or I get North America, you get South America. And things like that. And finally, they agree to fix prices and interest rates and all of this sort of thing. And first thing you know is that even though they're made up of separate corporate entities, they work together in such unity and such coordination that essentially they're only one business enterprise as far as the public is concerned, and that they don't compete, and the consumer is stuck with that. It's a monopoly. It's a shared monopoly, and so they either pay those prices under those conditions or they don't get the service or the product. So that's a cartel, and that's what the Federal Reserve System is. And I was just appalled to learn that is the case. And so you start with that and just think about it long enough, and all of a sudden it begins to sink in that, all right, if that's what the Federal Reserve System is, if it's a banking cartel, then what is the purpose of it? What's its mission? Well, its mission is the same as any cartel, which is not to serve the consumer or not to conserve the best interests of the American public, but to advance the best interests of the members of the cartel, period. And that explains everything, and all of the mist and fog clears away once you pierce that light right on the central fact that this is a banking cartel. And now you can see that there's a rationale behind everything that the Fed does, and it makes sense. People would say, well, they're making mistakes. Look, the economy is not benefiting from raising those rates or lowering those rates. The economy is struggling. The people are losing employment position. Their wages are not buying what they used to buy. They're failing. The Fed is failing. Can't they see what they're doing wrong? Well, no, the Fed is not failing, because we're trying to make it seem that was the mission of the Fed, is to worry about us. No, the Fed is succeeding. Every time one of the banks gets into trouble, what happens? The Federal Reserve goes to Congress and says, look, buddy, that you got to bail us out. You got to get the money from the taxpayers and give it to us, because if you don't, this nation is in trouble. We can't let the banks fail, can we? So every time there's one of the banks do something stupid, they make bad loans to third world countries or corporations that are going out of business, and all of a sudden the bank's loans go bad. What happens? Why? The Federal Reserve steps in there and bails out themselves, the banks. And all this money goes from the taxpayer to the banks. The banks always come out doing well. And we think, how did that happen? Well, it happened because the Federal Reserve is a banking cartel. So I thought I would just take a moment and repeat that, perhaps too many times, but people need to understand, as you said, Dan, that this is not federal. It's about as federal as Federal Reserve, the Federal FedEx. It's just a name. And, of course, what I discovered when I was doing early research is that when these guys representing the biggest banks in the United States, we're talking about J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller banks and Kuhn Loeb and Company, these guys back in 1910, they were the giants in the banking and insurance industry. They dominated the financial markets, and they still do, of the United States. And so they came together and created this cartel, and so that they could control their own business, because they knew that there was a lot of pressure underfoot at that time for Congress to pass real legislation that was going to really control and limit the actions of this banking industry. They didn't want that to happen, so they decided, all right, the public wants banking reform, we'll give it to them. So the banks themselves then secretly took the front row in creating the legislation that was supposed to control and monitor the banking system and make sure that it, served the people. But what the people didn't know is that the legislation which was being drafted to control the banks was being written by the banks. That's why the secret meeting was held on Jekyll Island back in 1910, while they worked out this chicanery. And it was all a big secret. They denied there was such a meeting. They denied they had anything to do with it in those early years. And it's a fascinating story. And so, I don't know, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think that maybe more people, not only in America, but around the world, because the same thing in general is happening in every country, this is a scam. It's really a fraudulent arrangement. It's legalized plunder, because this process is stealing the purchasing power away from the citizens of their respective countries. While purchasing power goes down, 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 my gosh, how much it takes to buy a car or house today compared to how much it took to do the same thing when the Fed was created back in 1913. And you can see how much purchasing power has been plundered away from the American people, all quite legally, all quite quietly, invisibly. People need to understand this process, because if they don't, they're going to wind up as complete paupers. They're going to wind up with nothing, and nothing except the servitude to the banking system and its partner, the government.
Ed, I have to say you've hit on something that we've talked about a great many times, but the fact that World Bank, they give these loans out to these third world countries, to these tin pot dictatorships, and they collateralize those loans with their natural resources in those countries. So when they fail to make their payments on those loans, the banks take the natural resources of those third world countries, and then they turn around and ask the American taxpayers to bail them out, because it's not good for the world's business that they're having these failures, these defaults on these third world debts. And the whole has always been designed to lead us from a sound money environment. We were a gold and silver backed currency system and financial system. And in 1933, Franklin Roosevelt made it illegal for Americans to own anything other than a very small amount of gold. And then in standard, and Richard Nixon took on gold standard until 71. But he took us off that in 71. And since then, Katie barred the doors. I mean, we've been printing money like there's absolutely no tomorrow. And frankly, we're getting to the point where there may not be a tomorrow, because we've printed so much money. And this whole concept is designed to lead us from a sound money environment into a totally controlled digital financial system that they control every aspect of, and the citizens have no control over whatsoever. I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Well, you said it very well, Dan. I think that's exactly the direction in which it's heading, and it should be obvious now to just about everybody. These people that we're talking about, these heads of these central banks and these investment banks around. I mean, these are the rulers of the world. If you think that the politicians, you're making a bad misjudgment of the balance of power. The politicians have been purchased, and if you create the money out of nothing, if you have the ability to determine the money supply and how it flows and the interest rates, which means how much it costs, and who your friends get the low interest and your enemies get no loans and so forth, you have so much power over the political system, because you can literally buy up all the politicians you need. So the politicians then are on your payroll to a large extent, and not that you have withholding taxes or anything from their paychecks, but they understand that their wealth and their prestige and their position in society depends entirely upon their willingness to cooperate with you, who are the ones who are creating the money and controlling the money flow. So, this business of money is not just about being able to have enough left over at the end of your life so that you can retire comfortably, or it's not just about having enough to buy a new couch or new drapes for the living room or send your kids to school. All that's important, of course, but it's much bigger than that. It's about control over your lives, and we're coming to the point where it's increasingly obvious. I think everybody should be able to see it now, especially with the advent of cryptocurrencies and invisible money that you can't even put in your mattress. I mean, you can't even put it in a coffee can and bury it in the backyard because it doesn't exist except as an electrical impulse in a computer someplace, and not even there. I mean, who knows where it exists? It's all very ephemeral and that kind of thing. So anyway, we're heading in that direction to the point where these financial elites, and that's exactly what they are. It sounds a little extreme, but it's not. This is not conspiracy theory. They're very elite, and their power is based on finance. So let's call them what they are: the financial elites. They have a plan, and we know about their plan because they talk about it. They hold conferences on it. They write white papers on it. They give speeches on it. They tell us what their plan is, and their plan is to get rid of all tangible money. They do not like anything that you can stick away someplace and hide from them. They do not want any. They do not want gold and silver that will last forevermore and have some use, even if it weren't used for money, could be used for something else, which is one of the reasons that it makes it good money. They don't like that. They don't even like credit cards because you can hold the credit card. They just want the digits assigned to you in the great ledger in the sky, and as long as they have control of that ledger, and if they have the control over a little on and off switch that goes to your personal purchasing account, they can turn you off. And I mean that literally. They can turn you off if they don't like you. If you speak against their power, if you say what I'm saying, for example, let's project this into the future, not too many more years, I could wind up and say, well, I already told them the truth, didn't I? And I go out to buy myself a hamburger, and they'll say, sorry, sir, your account has no unit in it. You cannot buy this hamburger. Oh, what do you mean? Is something wrong? No, sir. It says here that you are politically incorrect, and you are to be punished. And so I'm sorry about that, sir, but no hamburger. Well, the hamburger, that you can get along without a hamburger, but what about no food at all? What about no ability to buy, to pay your rent? No ability to buy a ticket to go someplace. No way to buy gasoline. Cannot fly an airplane, get on a bus. You can't. In other words, you're a beggar. You're forced out into the streets. You're completely dependent on charity of others, and they too are facing similar restraints, and so they don't even want to help you or talk to you for fear that they get turned off. This is where we're headed, and this is serious stuff.
Ed, you're right. We have the break coming up. We'll pick it up on the other side, and I'm going to introduce Josh Anderson. Welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and today our guests on the radio program are Mr. G. Edward Griffin and also another gentleman who is new to our radio show, and he is also going to be a new sponsor for the Connecting the Dots radio program, and that is 7K Metals, and this gentleman is one of the founders. He is one of 4 founders for this, but Josh has a tremendous entrepreneurial background, and I'm really excited to get him on board with us as a sponsor. And I'm also really excited to introduce Josh and Ed Griffin, because you folks need to be working together. There's no doubt about it, because what we've talked about in the first half hour is exactly why 7K Metals is in existence. So, Josh, welcome to the radio program, and give our listeners a little bit of information about yourself.
Well, I appreciate that, Dan. It's a pleasure to be able to be here this morning, and thanks to Mr. Griffin for your thoughts so far this morning. It takes me back for just a second to 2009 when, during the financial meltdown, myself being an entrepreneur and a business owner, when that happened in our country, it led me to his book. I thought, how can we just be changing interest rates on a daily basis? And so somebody said I needed to read The Creature from Jekyll Island. And so for me, it's a pleasure to be here today, because that started for me a path in understanding how our Federal Reserve System worked, the hoax that it is, and in large part led us to a position where we are today with company 7K Metals. We'll talk about it a little bit, but from a personal standpoint, I just tell people, Dan, I'm a businessman. I love finding problems in the marketplace and coming up with creative and innovative solutions that can better the product or service or industry that the problem exists in. And so throughout my life, I've had the opportunity to do large-scale business around the world in multiple industries, wherever there's a need, wherever there's a problem. And here at 7K Metals, we see the largest problem that exists in the world today, and that being the advent of fiat currency and the overwhelming acceptance in the world that those currencies have value. And out of those problems came the solution and the advent company of 7K Metals. And so at our heart, we're just a group of entrepreneurs that think that we can change the world.
Well, I think that, frankly, this group on the radio call right now on this program are the people that will change the world, because, frankly, it's the understanding of what fiat money and what all these international banking cartels are all about is going to lead, I think, the average American and people around the world to understand that any system that is designed to take away their freedom of choice and their right to determine for themselves how they want to handle their finances is going to be something that is going to be very, very detrimental to the American people, to the world's population. And the sooner we realize that this control mechanism is cradle to grave, the sooner we're going to get out of this mess. So, Ed, I'm sorry that I had to cut you at the break. Go ahead and finish your thoughts, and let's kind of get this conversation started about why gold and silver is so important as an alternative asset to get people really an insurance policy against total, let's say, call it cradle to grave control.
Well, yes, Dan. I was pretty much through with my concept, my idea there, which was simply that those who want to control us know that the one thing that stands in the way ultimately of controlling another human being is their independence. They do not like independent people, which is why the trend always has been for the last decades or many decades now is to make people dependent on someone else, preferably the state, and because that's the way of controlling people. And of course, the ultimate test of independence is the ability to purchase something, to purchase travel, to purchase education, to purchase food, shelter, and so forth. And that means money. So it's not surprising that those who want to control us do not want us to have money that is beyond their control. They want to control the money and how much of it we get, what we do with it, and so forth. And so I was simply going to the end of that process, which is the goal that's now, we can see it on the horizon. It's no longer hidden over the horizon. It's right there. You can see it if you look at it out there. And it's digital currency. And they're trying to sell it to us right now as the best thing, since apple pie. There would be some advantages to digital currency. Like, for example, we have digital currency now in the form of credit card purchases and so forth. There's a lot of convenience there. But the kind they're talking about is the kind that cannot be converted from a credit card account into cash, something you carry around in your pocket. What they have in mind is something that's totally digital and not have a physical form whatsoever under any circumstance. And that means ultimate control over us as a human being, because we are no longer even with a semblance of independence. So that was the end of my thought, and it's a perfect segue, as you say, into this issue of gold and silver. And why is that important? Because it's just the opposite of what these people want. Gold and silver is the ideal money. I say it's ideal not because I think so, but because every culture, every nation in the world throughout history has come to that same conclusion through trial and error. Nobody sat down and said, okay, we're going to use gold or silver because we think it's the best form of money. What's happened is that in every culture or nation where people were free to experiment, eventually they came up with gold or silver. It's just trial and error produces that result. Now, maybe that'll change someday. I don't know if somebody figures out how to make gold and silver in their kitchen, and it's suddenly not rare anymore, which it has to be a good source of money. Then that might change, but right now, that's the way it is. So that's it, and so I'm delighted to hear about your new sponsor, 7K Metals, because although I'm anxious to hear what that story is about, I have a pretty good idea. It has to do with precious metals and a real sound basis for a money system.
Well, and one of the things that I tell people when they ask me, because I have a lot of people ask me about sound money, gold and silver. In fact, Ed, I think that's when I first met you. We were trying to do a sound money bill in the state of Montana in the legislature, and you were one of our expert witnesses to talk about it. Sadly, we had too many Democrats and Rhino Republicans in our legislature to see it get passed into law, but we certainly made a valid effort at it. But anyway, one of the things that always pops up with gold and silver is that it is something that takes actual physical labor to create. And that was always the foundation of sound money, was that it had to have a characteristic of durability. It had to be something that had to be created with labor. It had to be easily weighed and measured. It had to be something that was durable, could not be destroyed. And it had to be something that was widely recognized as having value. And certainly all those things are, I think, part of the intrinsic values of gold and silver.
Well, I think, yes, that's all true, Dan. And to me, the most interesting item on that list that you mentioned of what makes anything an ideal money is the fact that it takes human effort to produce. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because nobody would go and spend the human effort to produce it unless it had unless there was demand for it, unless it was in demand by somebody for some use other than money. And that's the critical part. It has to be of value not just for its use as money, but for its use as something other than money, because that is what gives it stability. Money can come and go. People will accept money even though it's worthless as long as it's in demand. But what if it's not in demand? What if they create too much of it and people get sick and tired of it and they don't want it anymore? Well, then the money's value drops drastically. As we know, it's the process of inflation. But if the money is in demand for something else, let's say it's used in industry, like silver, for example, a great conductor of electrical energy, it's in demand whether you want it for money or not. It may go up and down depending on market values and so forth, but it's always got great value because people will still want it even if you don't use it for money. So if you put it aside thinking, okay, I'm going to use this as a storehouse of value because it's money, and suddenly nobody wants it as money, well, it's still good as silver for copper and silver wire and electrical boards, so you don't lose anything, or what you lose is much less than if it was just good for money. Anyway, it took me too long to say that, but I think it's so important to realize that one of the important qualities of a substance before it becomes really good money and useful and dependable money is that it takes energy to make, human effort to make, and it has use for something other than money.
You're absolutely right, and always gold and silver was considered an asset in our fiat monetary system that we live in today all over the world. Is money that's created out of nothing, and it's based 100% on debt, and the only people that have control of that process are the people who profit from it, the bankers. And that's an important concept, because when we had real money, anyone could hold it and anyone could have it, and it held its value. And now the system that we live under, it's literally controlled by a handful of people, and they're the ones who are profiting from the destruction of our economy. They are doing that through a process of debt, and so we've gone from an asset-backed economy to a debt-based economy. And that's huge, because ultimately the debt will swallow us alive.
Well, you say it so well, Dan. I think you should have written the book on this topic. You've got it nailed, in my view.
Well, thank you. Josh, I want to get you into this conversation because you and I had a fascinating talk the other day, and I know that you are someone who really understands so much of what's behind the fiat currency system. So let's talk a little bit about, you alluded to it briefly, but why you decided to start 7K Metals, and why you felt that it was maybe an opportunity for individuals to protect themselves through an insurance policy, and at the same time allow themselves to actually make a little money while they're doing this.
Yeah, Dan. So 7K Metals is born out of an idea that we understand that fiat currencies will fail. And as the four owners of our company, we are all very successful businessmen who've done business around the globe. And everywhere we go around the world and do large-scale business, we recognize that the individuals who hold the wealth in the world, they own gold and silver. No matter where I travel in the world and do large-scale business, the men and women I deal with have safes full of gold and silver. And it let us continually ask the question, if the wealthiest men and women in the earth hold gold and silver, why are the common people, us, just the average Joes across America and across the world, why are we not holding gold and silver? Why are we not protecting ourselves with this financial insurance? Why are we putting all of our faith in fiat currencies and in governments and to protect us and to preserve our purchasing power? And it really came down to, when we started to examine those things, we realized that the deck is stacked against middle class America and those people around the world who are a little bit uneducated in some cases. Sometimes they're fully educated and understand they need gold and silver, but the deck is stacked against them to acquire it. And as we dug into this problem, we realized really that there was maybe 5 different categories or problems that people just the average person couldn't get an answer to. For example, many people fall into the category of they don't even know why they should purchase precious metals. They've yet to read Ed's book. They've yet to study the subject, and they're being led blindly forward. They're putting all their faith in a digital currency and in in a balance, in a ledger, in a computer screen. And once they become educated, then a light bulb goes off in their mind and they realize that they should acquire some precious metals, some gold and silver particularly. But next, many people get stuck and wonder, what metals should I buy? You know, once you are enlightened and you know that you should buy some gold and silver, then comes the question, what do I buy? Do I buy bars? Do I buy rounds? Do I buy coins? Do I buy U.S. coins? Do I buy Canadian coins? Do I get things from the Perth Mint? Where do I turn? What should I buy? And there is so much limited information out there because much of the information is biased, right? Much of the information is skewed in this space of what I should buy based on where the highest profit margins are for the corporations or the companies that are selling the product. And we thought, well, that's a big problem. Third, we realized quickly that there was a lot of distrust in the space of precious metals. People couldn't answer the simple question of who can I trust to buy from? Because there's been scam after scam perpetrated across the world when it comes to precious metals. What I mean by that is many times people purchase precious metals, and when they get them, they blindly put them in a safe, and they don't realize that oftentimes they're not legitimate. They're fake. We realize that's a major problem, right? And another deterrent why the average person isn't buying. Fourth, how do I know I'm getting a good deal? Meaning, you know, when somebody goes out there and they try it, they don't have very much money. They have an extra $100 a month, and they want to get started buying some silver. Well, what are their options? Well, they either walk down to a local pawn shop that, let's all agree here, that they don't have your best interest at heart, right? They might go to a coin dealer in their local city or municipality, and they don't know if they're getting a good price, and oftentimes it's marked up 15, 20, 30%. Or they turn to the internet, and they go to places like eBay, or they go to online shopping stores that you don't know whether that's being sent out of a garage, a warehouse, or a legitimate business. But ultimately, Dan, we found that the biggest deterrent in all deterrents in purchasing precious metals and protecting your own family is the average person in America has had their purchasing power diminished, they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they do not have the extra funds available to make a purchase of precious metals. Whether they have full good intentions, they've read the books, they've done the education, they know that they should have it, but to break away and purchase $500 a month of gold, $500 of silver, is beyond their comprehension. And so what will happen is they get paralyzed, paralysis sets in, and they know they should buy it, but they just can't. Out of these concerns, 7K Metals was born. We said there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way that we can help the average person acquire it. So we started a company that's really simple. We all are used to Sam's Club, Costco, Amazon, Netflix, right? These subscription-based models or membership models where people pay a membership fee to cut out all the middlemen, to get rid of all of the extra steps. And that's what we did. We started a company here at 7K Metals that's a membership direct buying opportunity where we have wholesale buying contracts direct with the authorized purchasers to the world's largest mints, the U.S. Mint, the Perth Mint, the Canadian Mint. And we take those prices. And of people who have our membership, we turn right around and we pass those exact same dollar savings on. We don't mark up our metal. We take the wholesale number and we pass it directly on to our members. So now we answer the simple questions of, number one, am I getting a good deal? Well, you're getting it at the very best current price in the world. Documentation always beats conversation, so people go out and they shop it and they look at the price differences and they easily can tell that our wholesale number, because we don't mark it up, is better. But more important, they get it direct from the authorized purchasers to the mint. We get mint direct coins from around the world and bars and rounds. And so those allow us, right, to answer some of those other questions about trusted sources and am I getting the right metals? And we test all the metals. We don't believe the U.S. government for a minute. So we don't take the American Silver Eagles and say, yeah, they're coming from the U.S. Mint, they're good. No, we assay them all, and we ensure as another step of protection that they have been protected. But more important, we realize that if we didn't find a mechanism where we could help these people who have never bought precious metals before but know they need to, a vehicle to make an extra $500 a week, an extra $500 a month, an extra $2,000 a week, that we could never get the gold and the silver to the end of the row I live in Idaho. I'm a farm boy, okay? When we put water on a field, we got to start at one end, we got to get it to the end of the row. We knew that if we couldn't find a way for them to make extra money, that there was no way that the vast majority of people across our country could ever protect themselves. So we built a simple referral marketing model where when people refer our membership to their friends and family around the world, we pay them a commission. So instead of paying for huge advertisements on Fox News and going and getting paying millions of dollars to endorsements for somebody that's really cool and everybody knows to stand in front of the camera and then buy radio spots and TV ads, we just take all those funds and we pass them on to our members who make referrals to other people. And so we literally have tens of thousands of people around the United States that are currently making commissions with 7K Metals by referring our membership and doing one other thing. We realize, Dan, that, man, discipline is really hard for our society as a whole. And discipline is what makes the difference between someone being successful oftentimes and somebody finding themselves in financial ruin. And so we started a simple discipline program called our Coin of the Month program, where people are able to purchase, set on a Coin of the Month basis, one of our Coin of the Month options, where we send them every single month a coin. These coins are numismatic coins, that graded coins, MS-70 coins from around the world. And what that does is helps people create a discipline of collecting. And what we found is it's resonated around the world. We have people now all across the United States who are making commissions on a weekly basis. We are selling tremendous amounts of precious metals to people who have never had it. This is what's really interesting to us. We've been in business almost a little over 2.5 years, and 82% of our people in our surveys come back and state that they never owned precious metals before joining 7K Metals, and now have over $5,000 in precious metals. 82% of our members. That to us is a major success because we're helping the people who have never been protected begin to build through discipline a protection plan based in real currency, gold and silver. So that's how we started, Dan. That's what we're here to do. And it's just like you mentioned today, what's most important is that the only way that we can put the power back in the hands of people is when they actually hold the real asset of gold and silver. They actually hold real power then, and unmanipulatable by governments, businesses, bankers, Federal Reserve, if they hold just a portion of their income in gold and silver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and your model is a good model. And incidentally, as far as our listeners are concerned, you are sponsoring our program. You're a new sponsor. We're just this is the first week. This is the trial run. But how you sponsor us is not by paying me money every month. We have a membership through 7K Metals, and when people come on board with our radio show and go to my danhappel.com site and click on the 7K Metals icon and sign up, we are then earning that commission. That's how it works for us. And I'm very comfortable with that because then we have to perform and our listeners have to be serious about backing us. And that's the only way that we earn any advertising income from this. So, our listeners, please, think about this process because we can be really, really helped if you will just get behind this program. Our break is coming up. We'll pick it up on the other side, and I'd love to get Ed back into the conversation.
This is the Micro Effect.
The Micro Effect. www.themicroeffect.com.
Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel, and I apologize to our listeners. Our computer crashed. Our board computer crashed at our network, and we must be talking about something very, very important because it appears that we lost our whole signal there, and but we are back, and we are talking about fiat money. We are talking about the Federal Reserve System, and we are talking about precious metals and how important it is for average Americans to have at least a small insurance policy of precious metals. And so with that, Josh and Ed, welcome back to the radio show. I'm sorry that we had that short shutdown there, but I would like to get back into the idea of silver and gold. Ed, you alluded to it. You said that they always have value because silver and gold are useful for other things besides just money. And so no matter what happens, they always have value. And if you don't believe that, take a look at where we're at today with gold at $1,275 an ounce. Remember that in 1971, when Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard, we were setting at $32 an ounce. So obviously, the inflation in the amount of money that's been printed is the cause for most of that increase in value. So let's talk about inflation. Let's find out what is really happening that causes inflation. Ed, I'd welcome you to talk about that.
Well, sure. It's really it's one of those things that's confusing and simple at the same time. It's confusing when you start to look at all of the details of how different inflationary effects ripple through the economy and all of that. But it's really simple when you stand back and look at what's the overall principle at work. The overall principle is that money in exchange has to be broken down into small units and has to be exchanged, of course, passed from one person to the other. And each time that transaction is made, the person receiving it or asking for it has to make a mental calculation as to what it's worth. And that's constantly changing. I think you can see that. I remember when I was a kid, you could, for a penny, they talk about penny candy. For a penny, you could get a pretty good clump of candy in the candy store. Across the street from our grade school in Detroit, there was a candy store. That's what it was called. It was a little, almost like a little hole in the wall, and all the kids would bring their pennies that they had saved up or parents had given them, and they would get like a couple of big long licorice sticks or something like that for a penny. What can you buy with a penny today? But so where did that change take place between being able to buy a pretty good wad of candy for a penny and not being able to buy anything at all for a penny? To buy that same licorice stick or a couple of them, you probably have to spend 50 cents or 70 cents today. So where did the change came? Well, nobody can point to it because it wasn't any one point. It was a little bit every day that you look at something that you can buy for a penny or a quarter or a dime, that the evaluation changes so slowly you don't even know. All you know is that, well, once you could buy a lot and now you can't buy very much with it. And the thing that makes that happen is the quantity of those pennies or quarters or dollar bills that are out there. How easy is it to come by them? And it's something you just sort of get used to feeling and sensing. You work for your living, most of us do anyway. And so we know that in order to get that dollar or that $100, boy, that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And so we use that as a means of evaluating these units and what you can get for it. So that's a long way of saying that money loses its purchasing power, its value, when the quantity of money exceeds the quantity of goods or purchases that are available for it. And so the formula is pretty simple. If you're playing a game of Monopoly, and we all know that the game starts, everybody gets the same amount of money to start the game. So we all know what that money is worth. It's not enough to buy up all the real estate. You can buy maybe Marvin's Gardens or something like that, but you don't have enough money to dominate the board. So those little paper tokens that we call Monopoly money, we evaluate them in terms of how many of them it takes to buy a little green house, and how many of them it takes to buy a red hotel or a railroad or something like that. But supposing somebody comes along and says, hey, I found another Monopoly box back here, and look, all this extra money is in this box. I'm going to just dump this money into the game. Well, overnight or instantly, the money supply doubles because we found the extra Monopoly box and twice as much money. We distribute that among the players. Now what happens to the value of those dollars? Well, everybody's got twice as much to play with, so they're willing to spend twice as much for the little greenhouse or the red hotel. And so, the prices go up because the money supply increased. And so that's really all that happens in the real world. Inflation is merely the result of the loss of purchasing power. The value of the monetary unit goes down because there are so many more monetary units being created than products and services are being created. So it's not really difficult to understand. But now when you think about it, the only reason that money can be created, I should say, faster than the supply of goods and services is if it doesn't take any effort to produce the money. It takes effort to produce goods and services. You know how much effort it takes to produce what you create in your work, and it's not easy. So if you found, for example, that you were a shoemaker, and you knew how much effort it took you to make a pair of shoes, let's say all day long. Let's say you could make one pair of shoes in a day if you're a good shoemaker, a nice pair of shoes, and you could sell those shoes for $50. And if somebody came in with, let's say, a small gold coin or let's say a couple of silver coins, and they said, well, I want to buy your pair of shoes with these silver coins, you say, okay, that's fine. I'll take those 2 silver coins, and we'll say that's worth a pair of shoes. But what if they brought in, instead of silver, which took some effort to make, they brought in, I'm going the wrong way. Let's change it. Supposing we found out that through the increase in productivity equipment, machinery, it was suddenly possible to mine a lot of silver, a lot more silver, with the same amount of effort that it did last week. All of a sudden we found a new chemical or a new shovel or a new gizmo that, oh man, we could, with the same amount of effort, we could produce 2 times as much silver in one day as we could yesterday. Well, all of a sudden then the quantity of silver would start to increase, and more people would come in with those silver pieces, and they'd want our shoes. And if we're looking at this right, we say, well, wait a minute, that these guys only worked a half a day for that silver. I worked a whole day for my shoes. I'm going to quit making shoes. I'm going to go mine some silver. So all of a sudden, because of this fact that there's human energy involved, the quantity of shoes goes down because I just stopped making them, and the quantity of silver goes up because now we got one more person mining silver. And so the old law of supply and demand kicks in, and the silver supply expands, the shoe supply goes down. That means the price goes up again for the shoes, and everything has an equal balance, even though you discovered an easier way to mine silver, because the human effort is involved on both sides of the equation, and eventually it all balances out again. But you take that human effort out of it, and you can just make as much money as you wish with no effort at all, except just maybe hitting a keystroke on a keyboard on a computer. Well, then the whole game is over, and people, they lose everything, because the guys that know how to play that game, that make the computers and design the software, create money out of nothing, they wind up winning all the monopoly money at the end of the game. And you and I were trying to play it honestly. We're the losers. It's as simple as that. It's just a game of Monopoly.
Yes, it is. It's a game of Monopoly, and I beg our listeners to think about the idea of going to totally digital currency, where there's no cash, there's no dollar bills, there's nothing that you hold in your hand. And then imagine that those same people who created this whole system have total control over that, and they can control who gets money, when they get money, how much money they get. Boy, we have just lost all of our freedom, because it had people like you, like me, like Josh, that they might consider questioning the power of the government. All of a sudden, through political correctness, we no longer have the ability to buy and sell. We no longer have the ability to purchase anything because they have such total control over the system. That is exactly why precious metals and things like that are so important for the future of our citizens in this country, because without that insurance policy, without some ability to protect yourselves from that cashless digital society, we're pretty well screwed, aren't we?
Yeah, the game is over. It's really over. The only way out of that is through the most violent upheaval in society you can imagine. Nobody wants to even think about that. So, yeah, we've got to prevent that from happening, Dan.
Well, and that's why when I got involved with 7K Metals, I actually sat down and wrote out a landing page on my website at danhappel.com that described the way I saw precious metals as being an important insurance policy. And that's something I want to stress. Now, there might be people who buy precious metals as an investment, but I think much more importantly, precious metals should be an insurance policy against the ultimate and eventual unquestioned, it's going to happen, failure of our financial system because of the manipulation of the powerful central bankers. And that's exactly where I see gold and silver falling in line, is an insurance policy against the control grid.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. You said it quite well. Some people really are attracted to the precious metals market because they think that they can make money on it. And you're absolutely right, they can, if they're really smart and a little bit lucky, because we know that these prices are going to come back up one of these days soon. They have to eventually. If they don't, it means we've completely lost our freedom. It means the free market is completely dead. And it means that you won't be able to use gold and silver, because otherwise they'll put you in prison or hang you from the rafters or something like that. But as long as there's any essence of freedom left in the market, these prices have to bounce back up. And so a lot of people will speculate, say, yeah, I'm investing now, I'm buying it cheap because I know that in the very near future the price will be up and so forth. And I'm all for that, by the way. But that's I guess I think that would be called speculation. Nothing wrong with speculation, by the way. It serves a good purpose in the free market. But for the average guy who doesn't have the time or the smarts, the aptitude to play that game and follow the markets and know exactly when to buy and when to sell and how much and so forth, if you just want to protect yourself and get on with your life in some other way, well, then it's just a question of buying it for insurance. And that's how I do it. I have some gold and silver put aside. I wouldn't even think of spending that thing. Even if the price goes up, I could sell it and say, look at the money I made. But then what would I do with that money? I'd have to put it back into gold and silver to protect it from losing its value. So actually I said that wrong, because the gold and the silver really is the money. But what I meant to say is, look at all the fiat money I made. When I sold the gold and silver, which is real money, I sold that for fiat money, which is phony money. I could say, look at all the phony money I made. But then what good is that unless you want to buy something of tangible value, like a house or some real estate, an automobile, some machinery, maybe a warehouse full of goods or something? You've got to convert it back into something that takes human effort to make. Otherwise, you're going to lose the value as long as it stays in the form of that funny money we call fiat money.
Yeah, that's right. And we have to look at this as being an insurance policy that allows us to have the freedom to play the black market, let's say, if in fact we do lose our liberties, and everything becomes illegal to own, and everything becomes impossible to trade in a fair and free open market, guess what? The black market comes into play then, and it always happens. It happened in the former Soviet Union when their economy collapsed. The black market was where things were bought and sold, and that's where this insurance policy makes an awful lot of good sense, because during the time of the black market, when the rest of the economy is down, you still have the ability to buy and sell, and that's what this insurance policy should be about.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, unfortunately, that puts you into the position of being a criminal because you're violating the laws, supposedly. So then everybody becomes a criminal, and everybody knows it. Nobody really thinks that you are a criminal. They just know that you're violating the laws, which they feel are unjust and stupid. So everybody violates them with impunity. But nevertheless, it forces a law-abiding person to become a lawbreaker in order to deal with the black market. And it's just, well, it's not right, and it's not the way to build a free system or the kind of a world that you want to live in when, you know, you're forced to violate the laws in order to survive.
Well, and Ed, when laws become that kind of laws, then the reality is you're not breaking a law that's valid. Our founding fathers, the one thing that they tried to pound into us through their various writings and through the original Constitution and Bill of Rights is the fact that if a law is not good, it's not valid, and it's detrimental to the people, then it's not a valid law.
Well, yes, and that's sort of the origin, isn't it, of jury nullification. When a person comes into a court and he's tried before a jury of his peers, the original arrangement in our country, and coming from, from England and coming from natural law and all of that sort of thing, common law, the plan was that the jury was to judge on the law as well as the guilt or innocence of the individual. They might say, well, yeah, Joe Blow did do that, and it did violate the law, but we, the jury, decide that the law was unjust in this case, and therefore he did not commit a crime. That nobody wants to talk about that tradition anymore. I think it's an excellent tradition.
Yes, it is an excellent tradition. In matter of fact, it is really the essence of the American ideals of liberty, and it's part of our founding fathers. It's why the globalists and the technocrats are so intent on destroying the system that we grew up understanding was the greatest system of government in the world. And they've done everything in their power to minimize that. Josh, I want to get you back into this conversation. Tell our listeners a little bit more about the program for 7K Precious Metals and why and how we can, as citizens, act responsibly to protect our families by creating this insurance policy of monthly investment.
Yeah, Dan. Listening to your discussion here, it just brings me back to the validity that, we're using words like gold and silver as an insurance policy. At the end of the day, that's what it is. And that's just like you and just like Ed, I personally purchased my precious metals for that very purpose, not with the idea to sell them, but as insurance, and more to protect my purchasing power. We talked a lot this last segment about purchasing power and how gold and silver does that. And so at our core beliefs as owners of 7K Metals, we realize that people have to have that available to them, that they have to be able to go out and protect themselves with preserving purchasing power. For example, I recently, this last year, well, it's been about 18 months ago, I had a friend of mine who was from Mexico. And because of his situation and things here in our country, he was not able to just go through traditional banking mechanism to purchase a home. And he had been saving money at great length to purchase a home. But every time he saved the down payment, and he was just putting cash in coffee cans, okay? Every time he had saved the down payment, he would go back to the bank, and this crazy thing would have happened called inflation, right? And no longer the house that he was approved for, the price range he was approved for, there was no longer anything available in that price range. They didn't exist because the market had increased. Hence, he needed to have more fiat currency in the coffee cans, what the bankers continued to say, right? When he met me 18 months ago, I said, you know what you really ought to do with that fiat currency? You should go convert it to gold, because then you'll be protecting your purchasing power. And when you're ready to make a purchase of the home in the future, you can then go convert it back to this phony money, as Ed just alluded to. But what will happen is you will no longer be diminished. And I just spoke with him about a month ago, and he went and did that. And he's been continually, the money that the fiat currency that he's saving for the future for this home, he's putting into gold. What's amazing to me is he has let me know that by doing that, he's on pace next year to convert it all for the down payment, because it maintained its purchasing power. And so we can address the rest of that in a few minutes.
Yes, thank you, Josh. We'll do this break, and we'll be back in a few minutes to continue this. Well, welcome back to Connecting the Dots with Dan Happel. And today my guests on the radio show are G. Edward Griffin, and also we have Josh Anderson on from 7K Metals. And Josh, you were talking about your friend who had had been trying to save money to buy a home, and had kept salting away money, and the inflation was running faster than his ability to save money, and why he converted to precious metals. So go ahead and continue that story.
Yeah, Dan. So he was being outpaced by inflation, and so he took those funds, those fiat currency bills, and he turned them into gold. He just let me know a few months ago that by just that simple decision, he's keeping pace with the markets, and he goes, you know what? I'm not being outpaced anymore. He also came to me and said, more importantly, because I joined 7K Metals and I went and shared it with other people, I've now made an additional $2,000 a month every month for the last 13 months that I'm putting away towards this. And for your listeners out there who want to know how that works, it's really quite simple. We have a referral marketing model that's really simple. It's kind of like, you have to think of it like your frequent flyer miles, okay? We all are used to those things in the world. We accumulate miles when we go fly. Well, what we do at 7K Metals, Dan, that makes it so that he could earn those extra funds, is we allow people, every time they make a referral to someone who buys a membership at 7K Metals or gets on our coin of the month, it generates points. And we just have this simple left and right sales team in your organization. And anytime there's a purchase of a membership on your left team, anytime there's a purchase on your right team, those generate 100 points. And those referrals might come from you. It might come from the people that you refer. They might actually come from people who are already in the 7K Metals family who make a referral, and they credit for you. But every time there's 500 points on one side and 500 on the other, we pay a $500 commission. And this gentleman, my friend from Mexico, who now lives here in the United States, has now been making $2,000 a week a month, with 7K Metals. And so he's able to not only keep his purchasing power for this home he's trying to buy, but now he's found something that he can do after work, part-time, to receive extra income while sharing what he's passionate about with the world, that being that every household in America needs to have some gold and silver as insurance. And so he's out in the evening on the phone helping share this message, share this vision, but in so doing, it's making his own hopes and dreams come true of owning his own home, storing precious metals for the future. And so really, really kind of fun to see the power of how your purchasing power is no longer diminished when you put it into gold and silver.
Yeah, that is one of the values of gold and silver, and I'm kind of a silver bug because I think silver is incredibly undervalued right now. But that's one of the advantages, is that no matter what happens, certainly with silver especially, it has an industrial application, a use, because of all the electrical devices that require silver, that it is always going to have a significant intrinsic value. And that's something that no matter what they do with the fiat currency system, that's not going to go away. And one of the things that appears to be happening worldwide, I think it's backed up by the experts who are in the mining industry. It takes more work, more physical movement of soil, of rock, to produce an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver today than at any time in previous history. Well, the reason for that is because there is only a finite amount of precious metals out there. There are unlimited amounts of digital currency that can be created out of thin air. And that's going to make the precious metals, obviously, more valuable as time goes by, because it's going to be harder and harder to get. And I see that as being part of the insurance policy. It provides a little bit of a backup in case the economy goes bad, everything goes bad, but they make it illegal to own precious metals. There's still an industrial application there, and it's always going to have a market value.
Absolutely. You know, there will always be a value for precious metals, and in the industrial space, as we've seen, especially with the explosion of electronics. So.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do a preview here of the advertisement that we're going to start running on 7K metals. This is a radio script. I haven't gotten my professional recording people to work with me on this yet, but this we'll take a trial run on it. But I think it makes an enormous amount of sense, and I'm going to go ahead and read the script for this new radio ad we're going to be doing for 7K metals. Okay, we start. Right. The stock market is setting at historic highs, but how much longer can this last? The 2008 banking crisis nearly brought down the whole world financial system and only managed to kick the can down the road a few years by filling the American taxpayers with trillions in additional debt. That was 11 years ago, and national and personal debt levels are much worse today, pushing us to the point where the dollar is nearly worthless. Gold and silver have been the true money for thousands of years, and maybe the only asset class left standing when the inevitable global financial collapse happens. You buy insurance for your car, home, and life to prepare for life's mishaps. Why not purchase some insurance for the inevitable world financial meltdown, especially if that insurance is better than money in the bank and available at wholesale prices? Support connecting the dots and ensure your financial survival by joining me at www.danhappel.com and click on the 7K Metals icon to learn more about a program that could be the best financial insurance policy in America. That's my ad. And Josh, I hope that describes what the point you're trying to get across, and I'd love to hear your comments.
Yeah, Dan, that is exactly the point we're trying to get across in the world. And it reminds me that, again, so many people just need a venue to go get it at wholesale. They just need a venue where to go transact business in the space. And I'm looking right now on my desk at a piece of literature that reminds me of something that I wish somebody maybe would have told me a long time ago, Dan. I personally purchase lots of bullion. I love gold and silver bullion. I'm like you. I buy more silver today than I buy gold because I believe personally in my own life that it has a greater upside today. But I also wish somebody in 1986 would have grabbed me. I wish my grandfather would have said, Josh, you need to also be buying some of these numismatic coins. I just wish somebody would have showed me that because, one of the things that we do here, Dan, in this coin of the month option that we have is we allow people to kind of put on autopilot, receiving or collecting a collectible coin every month. Well, those collectible coins, for example, an MS-70 Silver Eagle, I just wish somebody would have told me in 1986, hey, Josh, go down every single month and buy one of those. Wherever you got to go in the world, go buy one and just stick it away for the future, for insurance. Because had someone told me that in 1986, when they minted the Silver Eagle again after Ronald Reagan passed the Gold and Silver Bullion Act, had I just done that, I'd have spent about a little less than $40,000 to current date. But I would have over $1.6 million of real value in the collectible market. So in addition to the gold and silver bullion that I would have had this asset that has exponentially grown. And out of that is the reason why when we learn that information, we said at 7K Metals, you know what we have to do? The world needs us. The average person needs us to go build a coin of the month option program where people can put it on autopilot and get it every month so that 30 years from now, somebody else will not be able to say, nobody told me. And so I love your ad, Dan, and I love what you put together there.
Well, Josh, one of the things I think I alluded to you, Ed knows this, I've been a coin collector for 55 years, 57 years, something like that. I've been a member of the American Numismatic Association for close to 30 years, and I've been a coin collector. And one of the things that came out of all the different legislation and all the maneuvers in the banking industry, in 2006, the American Numismatic Association and some of the folks that were involved with that organization petitioned Congress, and they actually got a law passed in 2006 that exempts numismatic coins from confiscation. And so I think it's important to really understand that there are asset classes out there in the precious metals that are right now anyway fully protected. And that was one of the reasons that I always recommend to people, if you're going to collect coins, you're going to buy coins, buy numismatic grade coins that are graded by NGC or PCGS and are in plastic holders and graded, because they are considered a numismatic collectible coin, and they do have some exemptions from confiscation.
And by the way, we want to say thank you for your hard work in that effort, because when we learned about that was one of the major reasons why we chose numismatic coins as our coin of the month, meaning because that ability to have an asset that is not confiscatable. And we would be very misunderstood if we didn't understand history enough to realize that in the 1930s, when they did confiscate gold and silver, it would be naive to think that in the future that may not happen again. That would be very naive. And so for us, one of the major reasons we chose as our coin of the month options graded mint-state coins is that very reason of your efforts in helping pass legislation to make that so they're not confiscatable into the future. So thank you.
Oh, well, I'll tell you, it's really important for our listeners to understand. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt literally by executive order destroyed the Constitution, because there was no question. Our Constitution outlined how money was to be created and what it was to consist of, which was gold and silver. And when he, through executive order, just threw that whole thing out, it was amazing, because we were much closer to our Constitution in 1933 than we are today. So literally the government today could do almost anything they want and get away with it. So it's really important that we try to get into an asset class that has some protections by Congress. It's no guarantee, but it's sure a whole lot better than being totally unprotected.
Exactly.
You know, Dan, I'd like to kick something in here, if I may. You've made this statement several times very correctly, that purchasing precious metals is like buying an insurance policy. Absolutely true. But if you think about it, it's something different about buying this kind of an insurance policy. The standard policy, you spend money and you hope that the loss does not occur. But just in case it occurs, you're buying the insurance. So the best case scenario with most insurance is that you spend your money and that's it. You just spent your money, but you didn't have the loss. But you did lose what you spent for the insurance. And hopefully the idea is that what you spend for the insurance is much less than what the loss would be. But when you're considering gold and silver as an insurance policy, what you spend for your insurance policy, it's still yours. If there is no loss, of course there will be, because we know that the fiat money is losing its value all the time and will continue to do so. But the point is, even if that were not true, your premium that you spent for your insurance is still in your pocket, so it doesn't cost you anything, and with or without loss, it's a premium-free insurance policy.
You know, that's a really, really good point, because that is always something that those of us who have been coin collectors for a long time, it's the opportunity to look at the coin, to study the coin, to actually hold it in your hands. It's a fascinating hobby, and it's even a more fascinating idea as an insurance policy, because you buy an insurance policy, as you say, you spend the premiums, hoping that at some point, if you do have a loss, that it was worth your time to spend that money every month on an insurance policy. But what you've got is a piece of paper that's in a file cabinet somewhere, and God forbid you have that loss, then you can finally cash it in. With gold and silver, you've actually got something that you can put your hands on, and as you're paying the premiums for that gold and silver, you also have a permanent asset that is part of your financial well-being. So what a great, I'm glad you said that, because that's a perfect way to look at it.
Yeah, you're paying yourself to buy an insurance policy. Actually, it's really a hedge, is what it is. But you can think of it as insurance, and that's what hedges are. So yeah, it's a premium-free protection.
Well, and Dan, if I might
go ahead, Josh.
If I might add, so as the four owners of 7K Metals, we all come from an industry of this referral marketing model. We've made our millions of dollars in the past in network marketing companies, referral marketing companies as owners and executives. And typically those companies sell products and services where people earn commissions, products like weight loss shakes and energy drinks and face cream, right? One of the reasons we started this company is the very reason that we thought those companies have no real value. Just like fiat currency has no real value, we looked at the space of network marketing, referral marketing models, and said, those products have no real value. What if you could have this model and you could send them, just like we're talking here on insurance and precious metals, a product in the mail, hence gold and silver, numismatic or bullion, that actually has value, and then pay a commission based on that structure. We knew that would totally change and transform the network marketing, referral marketing model, as it has in the last 2.5 years. And so goes hand in hand with what we're saying here. You hold that asset in your hand, it's insurance for the future that you will collect on, or it's a product that you're earning a commission on in our case, that you will always have in your hand and will always have a value.
Yeah, that's really, really spot on. Well, gentlemen, we're getting toward the end of the show, but I want to talk about the Red Pill Expo that we've got coming up in Hartford, Connecticut in about a month and a half. And Ed, I'd love to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that. And Josh, I believe that 7K Metals is going to be one of our sponsors, one of our folks that'll have a table at that event. And so this would be a great opportunity to maybe plug the Red Pill Expo. Ed, I'll let you into that.
Well, yeah, thank you. That's one of my favorite pastimes of late, because the Red Pill Expo to me is very exciting. It's from my perspective, the Red Pill Expo is a way for us to present some very serious issues to the American people or to the people around the world, because we have supporters and attendees coming from around the world. But to present some very serious issues, but in a lighter way that it's almost entertaining and fun to explore. Guys like you and I have been around for a long time, and we're used to telling people, well, things are pretty bad. We've got to get serious about it. We've got to assume our responsibility of citizenship. We've got to be responsible citizens. We've got to make sacrifices. We've got to learn. We've got to become active. We're always saying, come on, let's do our duty, which is fine, but sometimes you just get tired of being told you have to do your duty when you are doing your duty, and you just have to do more of it. And so for a long time, we've been looking for a way to communicate some of our ideas to the world that's not so oppressive in a way. And so we came up with this idea. Dan, you were there when that idea hit the table. What about the Red Pill Expo? And we all kind of looked at each other and said, I wonder if that might work. Maybe people will think it's too corny. So we gave it a try. First time was 2 years ago in Bozeman, right there where your home is. Turned out to be a smashing success. People did come from all around the world. And they came because of the meme. Take the red pill and break the illusion and see life and see reality the way it is. And it was the meme that it was popularizing some very serious things. People came, we learned a lot, and we started a tradition that now we're in the third year, and the next Red Pill Expo is scheduled for June 7, 8, and 9 in Hartford, Connecticut. And we have 28 presenters there, all of whom have taken a red pill of some kind, and they're experts in their field, and they're here to tell you that in some way or other there's something that seriously affects your life, our lives, that we think is true, but it's not true. In most cases, what we think is true is actually the opposite of what is true. And these people know what they're talking about. We've been talking here about one of those red pills. Most people think that the Federal Reserve is a government agency. No, it's not. It's a banking cartel. Now, is there any bigger red pill than that? But there are red pills like that all around us in the field of money and banking and education and health care. And everywhere you look, there are important aspects of our lives that we're living in a dream world, and we think that certain things are true, and they're not, and therefore it's really affecting our lives in a negative way. All of these issues are up on the table coming at the Red Pill Expo, and one of those issues that is going to be front center is the 5G technology that we're being told is, oh, it's wonderful. It's going to allow us to download our video programs faster, and it's all been proven to be safe and all of that. And we find out, no, it's not any of the above. And so to cut this off, because I know we could talk for an hour on it, but I just hope that anybody that considers themselves to be a truth seeker, which means they have to understand and realize that we don't know everything. We're always learning things that are new. If we thought that we already knew everything, well, then we're not interested in things like the Red Pill Expo. But most of us are wondering, gosh, I discovered this was true, and that was true, and I didn't know it. I wonder what else I don't know. If you're in that kind of a situation, this is the place to come, because Red Pill Expo has a lot of information, most of which we hadn't heard about before. And so go look it up on the Internet, and I hope you like what you see and you want to attend. You can either attend in person, or you can watch the whole thing on video at no cost at all, actually, if you're a member or a student at Red Pill University. And that's a very low tuition rate, so it's practically free. Either way, you'll find all the information out on the website, which is redpillexpo.org. And I think you'll be very impressed, and I hope I can see you there.
Well, Ed, I'll tell you, I've enjoyed the relationship that developed between you and I over the last number of years. I'm telling you, this is a fascinating concept, and it's a lot of fun, and we've had so many positive comments over the previous two Red Pill Expos, and all I can say is that there are so many people who have finally taken the red pill. And this event is just an absolute eye-opener for everyone. And the list of speakers that are coming in to be presenters at the program are absolutely phenomenal. They're the leaders of the freedom movement nationwide. So I encourage our listeners, please go to redpillexpo.org. And look that information up and sign up, because this could be the best Red Pill Expo ever. We certainly anticipate that. So thank you. Josh, I want to give you just a few minutes to let people know about 7K Metals and how they can find out more about what you're doing.
Yeah, so really simple. If you want to know more about what 7K Metals is all about, why Dan's so excited about it, why Connecting the Dots has used it as an avenue now for the future for this radio broadcast, it's really simple. All you got to do, you can need a couple things. You can go to Dan's website, that's danhappel.com, and you can click on the 7K Metals link. It will take you to a site that's 7kmetals.com/connecting the dots. On that site, there's videos that walk you through what it is we do, why we do what we do. And it's really simple. If at any time you like what we're doing, you like our mission, you like how we're trying to change the world, it's really simple. You just click the Join Now button. You grab one of our memberships. We have a few different options. You can take a look at them, and all the information's there. And you can join with us. Whether you're just a bullion buyer, bullion buyers get the most value in the world from what we offer. Whether you're somebody who needs discipline to be able to start collecting numismatic coins and need to put it on autopilot, there's a solution there with our Coin of the Month for you. If you're somebody who has extra time but needs extra money, we're looking every day for like-minded people to go out and share our message. And we would love to invite you to be part of the family and start sending you commission checks so that you might buy more gold and silver, or you might be able to take control of your financial future. But it's really simple to just go to Dan's website, danhappel.com, click the link, or 7kmetals/connecting the dots, and you'll get all the information there that you need. So thank you, Dan, for the opportunity today.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. As always, it's been a real pleasure, and I thank you, Ed, for taking your time, Josh, for taking your time, and I ask our listeners, please join us next week when we'll connect more dots.